Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for December 12th, 2023, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brennan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for what is sure to be a chocolate-filled episode.
Do you even like chocolate, JD?
Oh, yes, I do. I'm not head over heels in love with it.
I'm guessing your wife is more. Yeah, I was going to say,
my gosh.
we talked about your wife having the diet of a 4-year-old or something like that.
No, she loves it. It is her first love. It is the thing she would eat exclusively if she could.
Your voice kind of dipped a little bit as if to like suggest, I guess I have to accept this now.
I do. No, it was day one. Day one that we met, accepted it, that chocolate is for sure her biggest love in this entire world.
Okay.
So yeah, she would love to explore Wonka's chocolate factory.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm kind of with you though as far as my love of chocolate. I've never been much of a sweets guy. I think we talked about this on the show a few times. Like my version of sweets is like realistically, it's something like a good fruit salad or something like that. Like
you're a big strawberry guy.
Yeah, I'm a big strawberry guy. It's one of my favorite foods. But if I want genuine sweets that I would call candy, I drink bourbon. That's my candy right there.
There you go. Bourbon is good candy. Yeah. And look, I can indulge in it. I'm not one to shy away from, let's say, a good apple pie, or depending on the cake, I can certainly get into it. I will sometimes steal my son's Skittles if he has a few laying around.
See, like that I can't do. Like those fruit-themed candies, I've just never really, which is interesting because I love fruit, but I don't love fruit-flavored candies.
I can do the Skittles, but I'm not sitting here craving any of it.
Same,
if you put it in front of me, sure, I will have.
And I'll enjoy it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go out and buy it actively. If it wasn't for my son, I would not be eating Skittles. If it wasn't for my wife, I would not be eating chocolate or apple pie. Like that's just, well, maybe the apple pie, but that would be where I would draw a line in the sand. I wouldn't do much beyond that.
It is the holidays. I feel like it's a time for apple pie and pumpkin pie and things like that. So it makes sense now. But come January, the next time I'll have candy is probably on Valentine's Day, if I'm being honest.
No, I don't seek it out. The problem is I live with children, 3 of them. And it's around me all the time. And that's why I have to try to, do my best to show some self-preservation and stick to my convictions and stay away from it as much as I can because it's in my house constantly. But if I was living by myself, I would never buy any of it. I'm not that huge of a sweet tooth.
Nope, which hopefully doesn't translate to our feelings on Wonka. That's a very different conversation. Maybe we might not love his product, but we'll love the movie.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I did all week? I was looking up ramen recipes. That's the kind of eater that I am. I was looking through, and I love
ramen.
I went through no less than 30 of them. I was looking up all kinds of ramen recipes, and so the last 2 days, that's what I've been doing, is making ramen for myself at home and loving it. So like
that's
I've been
amazing.
Enjoying. So like that's
bring me over next time, man. I'd love to partake in your ramen escapade.
Yeah, sure. You guys are totally welcome.
That'd be a fun name for a band, Ramen Escapade.
Yeah, there you go. But, we're here to talk about Wonka, and I will indulge in a little chocolate deliciousness. So
yeah, we'll grab some dessert.
Some dessert. So this Wonka is directed by Paul King, everyone's favorite except for our lovely friend Dave Giannini.
We won't talk about him.
Not a fan of Paul King.
I don't know. I think it's less Paul King. It's more so Paddington.
The Paddington discourse.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he's back, Paul King. here with Wonka. It, of course, stars Timothée Chalamet as well as Kala Lane, Keegan-Michael Key, Olivia Colman, Hugh Grant, Sally Hawkins is in this, among others that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with Wonka, you're not from planet Earth, but just in case. With dreams of opening a shop in a city renowned for its chocolate, a young and poor Willy Wonka discovers that the industry is run by a cartel of greedy chocolatiers. Okay, Brendan.
Okay, I love that. I love the way you got animated once again.
Yeah.
And I do have some positive thoughts about the way that chocolate is treated as this like criminal currency of sorts,
Yeah.
like a black market.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's get into this drug movie, Wonka.
It is a drug movie. You're not wrong. I mean,
it really is. Right?
Depending on where you get your chocolate from and what other added ingredients are put in there, it is kind of a drug, right?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe it's full of caffeine, which is a drug.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sugar is highly addictive.
Yeah. Might not be a drug, but it should be.
It probably should be. I mean, name a more addictive substance. I don't know if you can. Sugar is the king of the world. Thus chocolate.
I could probably think of other examples, but I digress.
Anyway, the word chocoholic is a part of this film. So
It is.
chocolate and addiction is at the core of this movie. It's like The Whale, but with music.
Oh yeah.
I say facetiously.
Keegan-Michael Key might agree with that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we might
All
talk
right.
about that.
All joking aside, though, Brendan, what did you think about Wonka?
I am just glad that it feels like a Paul King film. I really am.
Yeah.
You know, let's talk about him for a little bit, because this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is his third film, his third directorial effort, his third feature. The other two being Paddington and Paddington 2. I love both of those Paddington films, especially Paddington 2. I do think it is quite a wonderful experience. And I love that this film does retain a lot of what Paul King is known for. It does feel very much in line with both of those Paddington films, that it doesn't feel like either a director for hire job or just some type of assembly line product. It really doesn't, for the most part. And I really appreciated that. I don't know if it's the British sensibility of it all. Like, it still retains a lot of that tone, a lot of that vibe that really does fit this aesthetic very well. And I think a lot of it also comes down to these really charming performances, especially from the supporting cast. I'll just name one name out there, but I'm sure we'll talk about many of them. Kala Lane as Noodle, I think, is the standout here. I really do. I think she's adorable. So I am mostly all in on this movie, especially as a musical. I mean, a lot of the songs are kind of samey, if I'm being honest. I think the songs are mostly okay, but it's kind of one of those cases, you hear one of them, you kind of heard them all until it actually reprises something from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Okay. Fair.
But I think they're mostly good. I think the musical numbers themselves are pretty inventive and pretty extravagant. There's one thing holding this movie back for me as to why I don't love it. I did not like Timothée Chalamet as the titular role. You know, ironically, for a man that makes and sells chocolate, I thought he was kind of vanilla, if I'm being honest. How
long did you think of that? Be honest.
About 2 days ago.
course.
I was saving it. I'm patting myself on the back for that one. I feel like an asshole right now. and I do want to try and be careful how I say that, because I actually do like Timothée Chalamet a lot as an actor. Pretty much everything I've seen him in, I've really respected his work as a performer. Especially movies like Call Me by Your Name, Lady Bird. I actually like him a lot in Dune. I can't wait to see him in Dune Part 2. Yep. So I think he's a very talented and versatile actor. I just feel like he was kind of miscast here. I think they're going for a youthful energy that I don't think he quite has anymore. And I don't know. It's hard to explain what it was, but there was something about his presence that I didn't find all that charming or even that grating. I felt like he's easily my least favorite thing in this movie. And it's unfortunate that it is really his movie. I was way more interested in the camaraderie of those around him, like Noodle or even Olivia Colman and her her romantic endeavors around, what was that guy's name? Badger or something? I have to look this up, but Bridger, I think it's Bridger or something like that. All that stuff I thought was really interesting. It's really just the Chalamet of it all that I didn't really fully buy into, which is unfortunate. I think this movie could have been really special for me if it weren't for that. But I think everything else around here is really good and extravagant. And I do love that as a directorial effort, it does still feel like a Paul King film. And that doesn't happen very often when it's like this type of franchise prequel kind of thing. It does still feel very, very visionary in that regard. So I do like it. I still like it. It's just the central performance that I'm a little iffy on.
Okay. Well, I'm with you in the sense that I really like this film. I
Okay.
found it utterly delightful. I love its whimsy. At times, it's surprisingly quite poignant. And I love how it quite marvelously channels the spirit of Roald Dahl while having its own singular
Right.
vision.
Right.
And I really like this cast. I like how Paul King taps into that with his aesthetics, the production design of this film, the music that accompanies everything that we see here. But I think maybe more than anything, the playfulness of this cast is just remarkable.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. Everybody understood the assignment here. They know what kind of movie this is. They're having a lot of fun. And that includes our cartel, who really plays up the whole villainous chocolate cartel thing.
I just have to call out Patterson Joseph here as Slugworth, the main the main
good.
baddie here.
Yeah.
You talk about understanding the assignment, right?
It's so good. Like it mustache twirly in the best of ways. Like I
Yeah.
just absolutely adore it. Maybe where you and I will differ the most is I did find Timothée Chalamet charming here. If the
Okay.
goal is to be perhaps a little magical or be beyond this sort of grounded I get like chocolate inventor, then maybe he doesn't quite reach those heights. And obviously, given the nature of the character, there is a magical element of it. So if he doesn't sell that for an audience, I could buy where you're coming from in that regard. I do think, though, in terms of the character's poignant motives, this background we get between him and his mother
Yeah.
and how he's driven by this pathos, I think he sells that well. And that's where I would honestly expect Chalamet to excel with this character, given what we've seen him before, how he's able to tap into that.
Oh, he's
it's
capable of
something
that,
he
yeah.
can do in his sleep. And I think he does that very well. So when he's talking about his mother, I think those scenes are really great. And I think that's why I really bought into his relationship with Noodle, because it's all driven by needing this business to work, because he wants to make his mother proud. And Noodle is an assistant, an accomplice, if you will, in these chocolate crimes that
Chocolate crimes.
I find really endearing. And I think, again, because it's wholly rooted in that pathos, I think it comes through in, again, these really charming and delightful ways. The whimsy of it all, maybe he doesn't tap into that or articulate that with a gravitas that maybe could have been here or arguably should have been here. But I think in terms of the grounded elements of the character, I think it's pretty good. And everyone else around him, again, really comes to play.
Stellar. Absolutely stellar.
Absolutely stellar cast. And it doesn't matter who you're talking about. Keegan-Michael Key, I know there's been some issues or some controversy around the fat phobia surrounding his character here. And I can understand that criticism. I don't know if it bothered me all that much personally, but I do understand where people are coming from there.
Yeah.
However, I do think Keegan-Michael Key as a performer does do it with diligence, and I think he offers some great levity here that I did appreciate. So if anyone wants to criticize the writing, I might not push back all that much, but I would go to bat for Keegan Michael Key as a performer. I do
I
think
would
he's
too.
good here,
I would too.
along with the rest of the cast. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I would too.
I found this film absolutely magnetic.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on the fat jokes here because I don't want this to turn into a socio-political conversation, but I will just say the fat joke itself didn't really bother me. If anything, it's just the repetition of it. And it's less so the like the joke itself. I think it's just more so the cheapness of it. It worked the first time. It's like, okay, let's regurgitate it like 3 or 4 more times. And it almost becomes part of the plot in a weird way, which
Yeah.
that part I kind of liked. Like that,
Yeah.
that at least could be like provocative enough to raise some kind of thematic conversation on our relationship with how these jokes function in movies like this.
Yeah.
So I thought that could have been potentially interesting. I just think it misses the
Especially
mark there.
given who he is. So
Yeah.
Keegan Michael Key is the chief of police of this town. So of course he's going to have these run-ins with this chocolate cartel, and the fat phobia comes from that dynamic. What you
Yeah.
would expect between an exchange between cartels and the chief of police, so that way the cartel can get away with what they need to. And that dynamic in and of itself isn't
It's
reinventing the wheel.
No,
And
but
of course this film is playing that up for laughs, and especially because we're talking about chocolate here.
Yeah.
So it's trying to have fun with that. And what would the result of that be if you're consuming a lot of chocolate? I understand why they chose what they did. It makes sense from a plotting perspective, from a character building perspective. Could they have handled that differently, or instead of him gaining weight, could it have been depicted in a different way? Maybe. I could understand that.
Yeah,
But
like
the idea
chocolate
behind
pimples
it,
or something like that.
yeah, exactly. You could have demonstrated it in a different way. I again, that's where I'm empathetic of the criticisms,
Yeah.
but would also champion the idea behind it. I think is actually very effective here from a plotting perspective and a storytelling perspective.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just distracted because I just realized I said chocolate pimples on an episode of the In Session Film podcast, which I've never done before and will probably never do again. But long story short, I do agree with you. It's definitely more of an execution thing, but I do think Keegan Michael Key is at least effective in his performance and what he's asked to do. To go back to the Timothée Chalamet of it all, I do think you make a good point that if there is any component to his performance that I was definitely more lukewarm on, it's definitely more of the whimsical side of Willy Wonka is depicted here, less so the emotional side of that character and the relationship he had with his mother. I think Timothée Chalamet is able to sell those moments, not so much the whimsy, and I think I found myself distracted more by that because Wonka is known as a very whimsical person, for better and for worse, whether played by Gene Wilder or Johnny Depp, right?
Yeah.
Like that whimsy is a major character trait. And I will give Timothée Chalamet some credit for not trying to regurgitate what either of those two actors already did previously. He is trying to do his own thing to the point that Wonka, it definitely functions as a prequel, but it still functions as its own thing in a way. Like it doesn't necessarily need to be viewed in relation to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, right? Like it can still be its own thing. And I do like that Chalamet is at least trying to bring his own energy to the role. But so much of that whimsy makes up so much of his performance that I think if anything, really it's more of a casting thing. And again, I don't mean to project my desires into a movie when I'm not the one making it, right? Like we don't like to do that. But at the same time, I do think I would have preferred to see someone younger in the role. Timothée Chalamet is at a point where, I mean, he's a very youthful, energetic actor, but he's in his mid to late 20s now, and he's starting to look it. He's not like Tom Holland that's always going to look 14 for the rest of his life, right? And I think having a younger actor with some type of like naivete, a coming of age of sorts that this movie does depict, I think that would have benefited not just the whimsy, but the overall arc of the character a little bit more. And I'm not sure if Chalamet is able to shed he's not able to shed away uh, those more elderly sides to him that he is now adopted, if that makes sense. I think he's kind of grown past this kind of role.
Okay, so I will push back against that from two different angles.
Okay.
One, I don't know if the character needs to be an adolescent here. We're talking about an aspiring inventor, this chocolatier with dreams of opening his own shop. Middle 20-something-year-old makes sense in that context, I think. I don't
That's
know
the
if
thing.
it needs to be a whole lot younger than that.
Well, and it's interesting because I saw a 30-year-old, even though he's not 30. Like that's and maybe that was part of it. Like I think having someone in that young 20s range, I think would have benefited this movie. And I know Timothée Chalamet himself is not too far removed from that. But there was something older about his presence here for me that I
Yeah.
don't know if it translated well.
Well, I did not sense that at all. Like
Okay.
his youthful energy and spirit, because to me, he still looks like he's 20 years old.
Yeah, I'm not
And
seeing that anymore.
I
I'm
think
not seeing
comes
that
through
anymore.
in the character. But here's the other angle of it. I don't know if that matters because so much of this film, when we're talking about where it goes thematically in the end and who gets involved with his antics in terms of overcoming the cartel and
Mhm.
what the spirit of this film is trying to convey in terms of chocolate and its meaning, how it's supposed to be experienced in terms of togetherness. You think about the characters involved,
Mhm.
and age is very intentionally not a factor.
That's fair.
Every
That's fair.
every coming of age arc in this film, if you will, or every character that has to overcome something is much older than Wonka, aside from Noodle. They're
Mhm.
all trapped. All of these characters are trapped in some sort of prison, and they have to learn to overcome that through the spirit and the whimsy that comes with Wonka and his antics. So the film is
Mhm.
very intentionally saying that regardless of your age, we can all have this shared experience, this
Okay. Yeah.
joy that we love called chocolate, and how that comes through in that final scene, especially the message that Wonka receives from his mother, and that's where the film is certainly, relaying its themes on its nose for sure, like or
Oh,
wearing
and
it
I
on
don't
its
mind that.
sleeves.
It's a kids
And I
movie.
don't
That's
mind that
fine.
at all.
Yeah.
It's done in a very Paul King way that I actually adore,
Sure.
especially because of the storytelling and the music and the characters and how we
Yeah.
arrive there.
Even the
But
use of exposition here is actually pretty clever.
I agree.
Yeah.
But you think about the characters involved and how the film uses them to convey that message, it all comes from that place of togetherness regardless of your background, your creed, where you come from, kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so his age or his youthfulness, I think, is honestly not a factor here at all.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, and maybe if I can try and articulate it in another way, if I go back to the two portrayals of Willy Wonka prior to this, being Gene Wilder and Johnny Depp, there's a big
Who
difference
are much
between
older than he is.
well, but no, let me phrase it this way. There's a big difference between having a childlike imagination versus acting like a child. And like Johnny Depp's the acting like a child side of that, whereas Gene Wilder, despite his age, is got this childlike imagination that
Yeah.
makes him very charming. That whimsy feels more like it's fueled by that childlike
Yeah.
imagination. With Timothée Chalamet, I was getting more of that acting like a child vibe, and maybe that's why the whimsy wasn't as fulfilling for me, because I actually do think those moments of pathos, as you mentioned, the quieter moments that he not only shares with Noodle, but really just with himself when he's reflecting on his relationship with his mother or his lack of a relationship at this point. I thought those were the better moments in his performance,
Mhm.
but that whimsical side is so present. And it did veer more into that acting like a child territory for me. And that
Yeah.
was kind of the disconnect a little
And
bit.
and look, I will not push back against that wholly. As I noted
Mhm.
earlier, when it comes to the fantastical part of this film. I don't know if he taps into that as robustly as he could. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I also don't think the character, this iteration of the character, is driven by that. It's a part of the character because of the kinds of chocolate he makes. It's maybe most prevalent in the scene where he opens the store for the first time. But I think the music and the production design maybe makes up for that more than anything else.
It does a lot of the talking,
It
or a
does
lot of the singing,
heavy
we
lifting
could
there,
say.
for sure. But the character mostly is driven by that pathos. Like, that's what's motivating every action here. He needs to escape this house. He's certainly a little naive. He's never been in this town before. He's never had to he's never done anything with this level of maturity before. And so he finds himself stuck, and the whole time he's trying to get out, he's motivated by one thing. And then his relationship with Noodle is clearly a side effect of that, but it's always coming from the same spirit, and that's what, to me, what makes their relationship here so mesmerizing. You think of that moment they go to the zoo, there's a fun little musical number there, and the way they escape, the way that crystallizes with another number.
That is, like, tonally,
really charming.
collectively, that zoo sequence is probably the best scene in the movie.
It's
honestly.
so good. I agree.
I think that's the fusion of all of these elements actually working in sync with one another.
I agree. And so, yeah, I mean, when it comes to having a childlike imagination like you see in that original Willy Wonka, I agree. It's he doesn't reach those heights, but Chalamet isn't as concerned with it, because on the page the character is really coming from more of a place of grief and aspiration than anything else. And I think he's able to tap into that well. We've seen him do that before. And
Yeah, he can do that with the
channels
back
that-
of his hand. Yeah.
exactly. And he channels that wonderfully here, which is why mostly I liked his performance.
I will say, and to give more credit to someone else too, a lot of those sequences also land because of Cal Lane, who I did mention already.
Yeah, she's very good. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's not the reason for those moments landing with regard to Chalamet's performance, but she does help a lot. Like, if there is any dynamic that you can really feel and understand, a lot of it does come on her shoulders too. Is this her first movie? I know she's been in a few television episodes here and there,
Maybe.
but
yeah.
this, at least this is probably her first real starring role that actually has some, marketability behind it. I don't even know how old she is in real life, but she is so charming and adorable here. I honestly
She's
would
14, I think it says here.
Okay. I would love to see a separate movie of just Noodle and her story. I think that there's a great story there for Paul King to tap into as well.
Yeah.
I would not be opposed to the Wonka cinematic universe just to get a Noodle movie. But I do think, those moments, especially at the zoo, which I do think once again is the best scene in the movie, a lot of that is because of that dynamic primarily on her side too. Cal Lane really is charming here.
No, I agree. She's fantastic and helps carry this movie alongside Chalamet as well. And the rest of that cast that's in that prison that Olivia Colman's character has, this hotel where she traps people.
Can we just talk about these character names for a second?
Sure.
Olivia Colman plays Mrs. Scrubbit.
Scrub it. Yeah.
and I got the name wrong earlier. I think I said Badger, but the character's name is Bleacher, played by Tom Davis. And this sort of romantic escapade that they distract these two characters with, I think, is really funny.
Yeah.
The villains here, Slugworth, who, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's a Slugworth in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So I don't know if there's a connection there, but
Yeah.
his two associates are Fickle Grubber and Prod Nose.
So
Like,
good.
That's Roald Dahl if
Love
there
that.
ever was one.
Jim Carter as Abacus Crunch. Oh, that's beautiful.
That is so on the nose. You just
so
have
good.
to love it.
Abacus Crunch. Rich Fulcher as Larry Chucklesworth. That's a good one too.
Rocky,
Yeah, I mean,
what's her name? Rocky Takrar or Takrar? Lottie Bell, her character name is. Yeah,
yeah.
this is fun. I just love reading these names. Miss
These
Bon
are some
Bon.
names. Yeah.
Freya Parker playing Miss Bon Bon. I feel
Yeah.
bad for Keegan Michael Key. His character name is just Chief of Police, but
Chief
maybe
of
that's the
police.
point.
That's so boring. Yeah. Yeah, no, but he's fun in this film as well, as we
Yeah.
noted earlier. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's the spirit of this film. It's just having a lot of fun. The music is really great. The production design is wonderful. It has a vigorous spirit that is just so diverting and charming, and it has some really great themes at the center of it that are just endlessly endearing, timeless.
Yeah,
I had a lot of fun with this
it's a
movie.
good kids movie, and while I didn't love it as much as you did, primarily because of Timothée Chalamet, it feels like a kids movie with some real conviction to teach kids something, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't feel like, let's say, the Super Mario Brothers movie, which is a very cynical way to get kids distracted just to, keep the parents occupied for a bit. It's basically the goal of that movie, right?
Yeah.
This actually is trying to engage children in a way that I think is very good. You have to at least respect a movie like that, and it does earn a lot of what it's trying to go for, even if it is simple. That's all that matters.
Mhm. Absolutely. But, maintaining that Roald Dahl cynicism in a sense when it comes to, let's say,
Yeah.
corporate shenanigans, shenaniganery.
Hey, if this is how you want to teach children about the crime cartels,
It's a
you might
good
be
way
better
to
off
do it.
using chocolate than cocaine, right?
Yeah. And I love how the film really leans into that, right? Because if
Yeah.
you were to remove the whimsy of this film and you made it dark and gritty and you substituted chocolate for, let's say, cocaine,
Oh, you have
how
Goodfellas.
many movies have
you
we
have
seen
Goodfellas
like
right
this?
here.
You have Goodfellas, exactly. And so I love how Paul King really leans into the whole doll of it all in that regard.
Yeah.
But of course, you do add in the fun, and you do make it chocolate instead. But that's what's so fun about the villainry of this film is
Yeah.
it has those same sensibilities despite the diverting qualities on uprooting it.
Yeah.
And certainly makes for some delicious scenery chewing.
A
we'll
sweet
say.
experience.
A sweet experience. Yes. A sugary, saccharine experience that
We're just trying to get on the
love.
poster now, aren't we?
Yes. Yeah. If the studio is listening, I will gladly come up with any sort of fun you want to put on
Heyday
the poster.
Pictures, come on.
or-
Yeah. Get us on the phone, please.
Exactly. Do you have any final thoughts on Wonka?
Well, let's see. The musicality is good. Like I said, I didn't love every song here. I think they are kind of similar, but all the musical numbers surrounding the music, I think, is really good. I think they're very elaborate and very inventive in their own way. I love Simon Farnaby in this. He's also a writer here, co-wrote all of the Paddington movies, and always has a cameo as some type of like security guard.
Yeah.
So
sure.
I love the reoccurring gimmick in that. We haven't even mentioned Hugh Grant yet as the Oompa Loompa.
Yeah. What did you think of the whole Oompa Loompa?
Kind of distracting, if I'm being honest. I think it's the Hugh Grant of it. I love Hugh Grant. I love hearing his interviews talking about this movie and how
That he
painful and
hated
awkward
doing
it
it.
was. He hated doing it. Yeah. so yeah, he's not afraid to keep his mouth shut.
Yeah.
But it. I think I would have preferred a less recognizable face in that role. But at the same time,
I think he's so fun though.
well, and I think that's the thing. It's like maybe I wish we saw a little bit more of him so that could have been part of the joke in a very meta and indirect way. Like a recognizable face like Hugh Grant playing an Oompa Loompa. Let's take advantage of that to really make that part of the joke. I think that's what made him so compelling in Paddington 2 as the villain, because he's so present in that movie. And it's such a weird role.
It's a small role. What did you think though of the gag that because I don't think we've seen them portrayed in this specific way before that I can recall. I haven't seen the previous Wonka films though in so long. I could absolutely be misremembering. But like the gag that, okay, so there is no factory yet, right? So
Yeah.
it's a different setting.
Yeah.
And we learn of this island they come from that obviously has chocolate that Wonka was stealing from them, and he was on watch, and so he had to basically steal all of Wonka's chocolate back to take to, like, that whole
Yeah.
gag. What did you think of that?
I would want to see that movie, honestly. I think that dynamic is actually kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It adds a weird layer to all of the Oompa Loompas that then work at the chocolate factory in the future, as if to say they're really just trying to pay back their own island's expenses. If that makes
Yeah.
sense. So it kind of adds this like almost like treacherous, like business like corporate kind of side to it that we never have really seen before. So I think that's a neat little layer that I selfishly would have liked to see a little bit more of. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, I think what's really interesting about it too, and I'll do my best to dance around spoilers here, but there comes a moment where it seems as if that debt has been paid. And yet, at the end of the film, because we know where this is all leading to in terms of the factory and the Oompa Loompas being a part of that,
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about the gesture at the end is that it isn't from a place of having to settle any sort of debt because that's been paid. Instead, it's more of a partnership. And I think that's also an interesting compliment to the film's overall ideas in terms of pointing the finger at corporate greed and how that becomes the downfall of these villainous characters, this cartel.
Yeah.
And this is the other side of that coin where you can reach out a hand, because up until that point, all we had seen is Lofty, I think the character's name is, the Oompa Loompa that Hugh Grant plays here. Like,
Yeah.
he had been stealing this chocolate from Willie throughout the entire film.
Right.
Now, of course, from his perspective, he thinks he's stealing something back, something that was stolen from him. And so there's a little bit of a dynamic there. But, you know, Wonka is just trying to capture him, trying to keep him from stealing, you know, all this chocolate that he made. So in essence, Lofty is essentially a thief, but the debt's been paid at the end. And instead of going separate ways as, these two entities that had a debt that kept them, I guess kept conflict between them.
Yeah.
And then that ends, and then Willie just lends a hand, like an opportunity.
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, and
from an equal position. Does that make sense?
no, it makes sense, and maybe that's why I would have liked to see a little bit more of that specific Oompa Loompa played by Hugh Grant to maybe justify a little bit more of that relationship in some ways, because I actually think that dynamic is really interesting. I like that idea a lot. I think there's a lot of promise there, and I think what we see here in the movie, it is mostly felt. Like it does enough to justify those themes that you're talking about. Yet at the same time, I think if there was ever a world where this movie was more about that weird relationship between Willy Wonka and an Oompa Loompa, like that could have really been an interesting dynamic to play with even more, to really convey those ideas. So yeah, long story short, I do agree with you. I think that's a pretty interesting idea in and of itself.
Yeah, I love that. And it's, of course, done with a lot of levity, a lot of playfulness. The film isn't dedicated to it wholly because it's about so many other things.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not going to be fully realized, but it's interesting and executed well enough that I did really like that here. And despite Hugh Grant not loving the process, I still think he gives a playful performance.
Doesn't he say that about like half the movies he's in?
Yeah, perhaps. And I will say this as well. I don't want to give it away for those that haven't seen it yet, but as the film concludes, there is a gag with Lofty that I did chuckle at, and I thought was really, really funny. And it honestly makes me want to go to the theater to see this. I watched this as a screener at home But because of that gag, like I almost want to go to the theater just to see that gag at the end and how people respond to it.
Oh, you're not talking about the end credits, are you?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, you are?
Trying,
Okay,
I was
okay.
trying to be vague about it. But yeah, there's a moment as the end credits start to roll where he makes a joke that I think is kind of funny. And I'd love to see people's reaction to that. So I might just have to make a trek to the theaters anyway. But
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, I really liked Hugh Grant here, even
Yeah,
if it
I
is
think
a
he's-
small.
I think he's
role
fun.
in the end.
He's fun. Yeah. So it's a fun movie. It's a sweet movie.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to speak to real quick. So you brought up Olivia Colman and Tom Davis and their dynamic, Bleacher
Yeah.
and Mrs. Scrubbit. So there's an interesting moment in this film where Willy Wonka manipulates Bleacher slightly to incentivize his relationship toward Mrs. Scrubbit. And it leads to this moment where he's wearing like these overalls and his thighs are showing, and it's really good.
There's a line in one of the songs where he being Willy Wonka says something about show some leg, right?
Yeah.
I was actually surprised that was in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very funny, and I love how Paul King frames that whole sequence as well. It's hysterical.
It's so
really
stupid,
good.
but it's so funny.
It's so dumb, but I love it. Yeah. It's great. So
Yeah.
Love all of that. I do want to quickly speak to, I'll say vaguely, because I don't want to get into plot details. There is a chocolate bath of sorts that takes place in the final act of this film as the drama starts to culminate. That I thought was interesting, especially given how we're talking about a cartel.
Yeah.
That is, of course, how they would handle that situation. And it's interesting because for chocolate lovers, it's almost like this.
It's so ironic. Yeah. It doesn't seem like it's dangerous at all.
That's like,
Although-
it's almost like the best way to go, right? It's like,
Yeah.
this is amazing.
Although, I guess it is actually dangerous because I'm looking at the trivia here, and apparently Timothée Chalamet got sick multiple times during production due to how much chocolate and candy that he had to eat for this movie.
I would believe it. Oh my
yeah.
God. There's no way I could, if I was an actor and I was lucky enough to get cast in this film, I'd have to say no. I couldn't do it. I would get sick so fast. That's why, going back to the beginning of this, I don't seek out sugar, not because I am better than everybody else. I physically can't handle that much. I will get sick really fast.
I crave water. I pretty much instantly. I just get thirsty.
So, I mean, I like chocolate. I like candy. I can do it in small bits, but yeah, I mean, in large quantities, I would get sick so fast. So doing this movie where you have to consume a bunch of it, oh my God, it would nearly kill me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, that's why we're not
the
actors in
irony.
a movie like this.
Yeah, but that's a funny phrase though, because that is almost exactly from certain characters' perspectives. That is kind of what is happening there at the end. So,
It's a good point. It's a good point.
but yeah, good stuff. I really like it. It won't end up in my top 10 or anything at the end of the year, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it way more than I anticipated.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think it's definitely the lesser of Paul King's films thus far. But at the same time, I like that it is still a Paul King film. At least it still feels like one.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say, and then we can wind down here. You noted that there's maybe a little redundancy with the musical numbers, or maybe they kind of run together. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I think in execution, they're still so charming and fun that I enjoyed them. Like every time they found themselves in a musical number, and maybe this comes down to, again, this cast and how playful they are, the chemistry they have together, the production design of the film, just Paul King's, vibrant sensibilities here. Maybe it's all of that kind of complementing the music.
Right.
But I found myself on the edge of my seat, enjoying
It's-
them, like
it's the-
tapping along with them, having fun.
It's the vision behind those musical numbers and the choreography of them, the extravagance of them. That's really what makes it all work, because they do all look different, right?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
musical numbers themselves aren't the same. It's just the songs that are kind of samey. So
Yeah.
it's one of those cases that if I were to listen to this soundtrack, it would probably feel like, "Wait, didn't I hear this song already?
Yeah.
Didn't I hear this song before?" But in the moment, you can sense a little bit of
Yeah.
differentiation happening because
Yeah.
of the differences in how they're visualized.
And I was just going to make that same point. I wonder what the soundtrack experience is, just listening to it outside the context of the film. Maybe it'll be a little bit more grading in that regard. I don't know. I haven't done that exercise yet. But when watching this film, I did find them diverting. I was having fun with this film and the music.
Yeah.
And maybe it is the vibrancy and extravagance of it all as well. But in context, I think it all works.
Yeah, in
well
context, it's
together.
not bad.
All pretty
I mean,
sound.
there
all
are no
pretty solid.
bad songs here. There's no bad. There's nothing bad about the musicality of this movie. It's just it's a little samey at times. That's about it.
Fair enough. At any rate, a strong recommendation from me. I really like it. I urge people to go and seek it out. And with that, if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say, please leave us, a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment below. Of course,
Please
subscribe
do.
to the channel, like the video, all that fun stuff. You can reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Let us know if you agree with anything we had to say here. If you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, rate and review us. We would really, really appreciate that. You can also email us in sessionfilm@gmail.com if you have any final thoughts or any long-form thoughts you want to speak to us about.
All right.
Brandon, anything else before we get out of here?
Well, the last thing I'll say is, looking at the trivia here, I thought this was kind of funny. For Wonka specifically, once again, I did mention a weird comparison between Timothée Chalamet and Tom Holland in some way, and how they kind of have this boyish look to them, but Tom Holland still looks like a young boy.
Yeah.
Guess which two actors were in the final running for Willy Wonka in this movie?
Those two, huh?
Exactly, yeah.
Honestly, I feel like I don't want to misjudge something that will never exist. I don't know. I want to say the right person got the job.
Oh, between those two, yes. But it's kind of funny that they were both up for this role and they were the two finalists there, when we've seen quite a few movies as of late try and build massive movies around those two stars. It's like Uncharted with Tom Holland, right? Or Cherry, like it's mostly Tom Holland. I feel like nowadays that like they try and use his stardom as a vehicle to make a movie, as opposed to utilizing his genuine abilities as an actor. Yeah, because he's a fine actor. Tom Holland is actually kind of charming.
Just put him in a role that services his abilities.
Don't put him in a Cherry.
Yeah,
that Cherry's gonna bomb.
It is going to bomb, and it did. It did not taste. It was very bitter. Did not taste all that.
It did not taste very well. That's the kind of sweets I don't like.
Exactly. No, that's interesting though. I did not know that. Did not know that though.
Yeah.
Would you say? Do you still prefer? This might be a silly question. You still prefer the original over this? I assume.
Absolutely.
You had it as a draftee on the main show this last week.
Absolutely, yeah, I do.
Okay.
I will say this: I don't technically hate the Tim Burton film Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I think there's a good movie in there. The problem is the Johnny Depp of it all. Like, I actually think all of the stuff with Charlie himself and his family, I think all of that really works. I think that's very charming. When it really is focused on him, it's great. It's just Johnny Depp's portrayal is so creepy and so awkward.
Yeah.
It derails that movie. So, yeah, of the three Wonka movies that we've gotten, this is definitely second place.
Okay. I don't love the Johnny Depp one. I don't really like it all that much.
I think the first half is really good. That's about it.
I'd have to rewatch it again, but my memory of it is not great. And while Gene Wilder offers an iconic, presence in that original musical, and he's really great. And it is a movie I do really like. I'm not saying that this one is better, but I might like it more subjectively.
Interesting.
I think I do.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I haven't seen Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in a long time, but as a kid, it wasn't one that I gravitated toward all that much.
Yeah,
I did not love it.
That's fair. That's fair. I liked it a lot as a kid. It wasn't a staple, but it was definitely one I saw and loved at an early enough age.
Yeah, that's fair. But and I did rewatch it once. I want to say in college, maybe high school, around that time. I did enjoy it more than I did as a kid.
Okay, gotcha.
And I certainly understand why people love it and why it has the reputation it does, especially Gene Wilder. I don't know if that role will ever be topped, but I think there's an argument in time that Wonka could overtake it. At the very least, I think subjectively I like it more than that original.
Okay. Well, there is a
Whatever,
craft
that's
to
what-
this one and a vision to this one that I do really like. If there is anything I could potentially give the edge to with regard to Wonka, it's that. A lot of it does come down mostly to Paul King and his vision of the movie.
Absolutely. And I do appreciate that while we're talking about the same characters, the same setting in many regards, they're two totally different movies in a lot of ways, despite the magical qualities that come with both. Like, obviously they're rooted from the same place, and maybe a lot of it is simply the time difference, but I do appreciate that it's almost like watching two different movies.
Yeah.
But two that complement each other in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they work together, but they don't necessarily need to work together.
They don't need to. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they definitely stand apart on their own for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I like when they do that. It doesn't feel the need to franchise it.
I agree.
Yeah.
At any rate, with all of that said, please go and watch Wonka. I hope you enjoy it as I did. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Who doesn't love a good chocolate drowning?
I'm gonna have a Wonka bar. That's what I'm gonna have.
There you go.
Yeah, sounds good.